Good morning, good afternoon. It's with great pleasure that we welcome you to the fourth webinar of the UNESCO Chair in Applied Research for Education in Prison. I'm Julie Autin, holder of the chair. Understanding the challenges and innovative practices surrounding prison education in various countries, measuring their scope and highlighting the project developed there, allow us to enrich our thinking and feed our development vision for this sector of education. Today, we will discuss the perspective of Nordic countries on prison education programs, specifically in Norway and Denmark. In this spirit, we're very happy to welcome, and I'm very sorry if I mispronounce the name of our panelists today. But so we are very happy to welcome Arve Egil Asbjørnsen, professor, doctor in psychology, Bergen Cognition and Learning Group, Department of Biological and Medical Psychology at the University of Bergen. We are also very happy to welcome Linda Kjær Minke, Professor WSR from the University of Southern Denmark, Department of Law, and also very welcome to welcome Annette Stoagard from the University of Aarhus, Department of Law, University of Greenland, where she is head of Department of Law. To facilitate the discussion, I am pleased to introduce Marc-André Lasselle, Development and Research Advisor at the chair. But before continuing, here is a reminder of the instructions. You can select the language of your choice by pressing the button illustrated by a planet at the bottom of the screen. And throughout the presentation, you will be able to write down your questions using the question and answer section. Members of the chair team will direct the question to the panelists. And the recording of this event will be posted on the chair's website within about 2 weeks. And we wish you all a good webinar. And Marc-André, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julie. My name is Marc-André Lasselle. I'm the professor of sociology here at Cégep Marie-Victorin and a former prison teacher. I am also a development and research advisor for the UNESCO chair in applied research for prison education here in Montreal North. So I'll now give the floor to Professor Arve Abjonsson, professor of logopedics at the University of Bergen. You can go.
Thank you for the introduction. I don't think my camera is on here, so.
No, it doesn't seem to be on.
Okay.
Oh,
there we are.
Great, perfect.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share some more work with you. Let's see if I can share my screen here now. I hope this is okay now. I must admit that I have quite a substantial number of slides I prepared for this presentation, because there is a lot of work I would like to summarize and give you some thoughts on. But I would try to limit myself, and if I'm not able to do that, I hope the organizer would just switch off my camera after a while. I have 20 minutes to go here, I think. First of all, I would like to recognize my collaborators' efforts also in this group. The Bergen Cognition and Learning Group has been doing this work for the best part of 20 years now. We have been surveying the prison education system in Norway. First was my friend and colleague Lisa Jones. She is professor in psychosocial sciences, in pedagogical psychology. We have with us on the team the research director Ole Johan Eikeland and my former colleague Professor Emeritus Terje Manger. And we have, at the moment, we have one PhD student in our group, Sunniva Sørhus. In addition, we have a long-term collaboration with Karianne Westheim, who's a professor emerita in education at the University of Bergen. Torfinn Langeli was the former county governor officer for education in prisons, and the present holder of this position, Paul Christian Breivik, is also one of the significant people we are dealing with. Just to give you a brief presentation of prison education in Norway. Education for prisoners have always been a kind of issue as long as we've had this kind of institutions in the country. In the 18th century, it was House of Correction, was very often used to prepare people for confirmation. They should get through and be an adult after been in a proper way according to the church regulations. In 1842, we introduced the Philadelphia model where solitary confinement, acclimatization to work, and an orderly lifestyle, as well as religious and ethical education and upbringing, was an important part of imprisonment. In 1902, we got the first prison act that was clearly stating that young prisoners should have education. Later on in 1958, it was a focus on work and vocational training in the legal sense of this. When we come up to more modern time in 1969, educational authorities took over the responsibility, and Norway started using what is referred to as the import model for serving the prisoners. So, which means that it is the local community and the service institution outside the prison that's also serving the prisoners when it comes to education, health, social services, etc. And we have been using this model since. In 1988, the state guaranteed the cost of all approved operational costs, the cover of all approved operation costs. So the Ministry of Justice took the responsibility also for school premises. But the responsibility for education itself was delegated to the county authorities that's also handling education in Norway at large. Another milestone in the work with prison education was that the parliament issued, the government issued a report on prison education to the parliament in Norway in 2005, as named Another Spring, named after a poem that was written by a prisoner at the time. The rights to education in Norway is stated by the Education Act that guarantees access to education for everyone in Norway. So we have the school system is not very different from many other places, but maybe a little different also. So we have 7 years of obligatory primary schooling in the age group 6 to 13, 3 years of obligatory lower secondary schooling, normally in age 13 to 16, and 3 to 5 years of voluntary, but still a legal right to upper secondary school, where the youth right is limited to 16 to 25 years of age, but it can be extended for adults after an application. In this upper secondary school, which is kind of similar to the American senior high school, usually there will be 2 strands, one college preparatory strand and one vocational programs. Further on, we have the act relating to university and university colleges that also ensures access to higher education, but also states some limitations that can be for college education. For the prisoners in Norway, it's been a very clear focus on trying to bring them through the upper secondary school, which both prepares them for higher education, but also prepare them for apprenticeship and getting a vocational training after the secondary school. The right to education in prison follows largely the right to education in the community at large. A fundamental principle of Norwegian correction is that the prisoners should have the same access to social services as other citizens. And the sentence itself is a loss of freedom and not of civil rights. What also happened some years back was that education was included as one of the obligatory activities that the prisoners had to participate in during the sentence execution. In addition to the national laws that we are referring to, we also have implemented international agreements and acts like European Human Rights Convention, statement from the European Human Rights Court, and also the United Nations Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. When it comes to the question about foreign prisoners in Norway, it has been stated that they have rights to the same services when they are serving a sentence in Norwegian prison, convicted of Norwegian law. They will then have the rights according to the same rights as a Norwegian citizen according to the equality principles of the law. These rights to education also been further elaborated in a paper authored by one of our law professors, Linda Gröning, with the title Education for Inmates in Norwegian Prisons, a Legal and Humanitarian Perspective. This was based on a chapter she wrote for us in a report on convicts from Lithuania, Poland, and Nigeria that we analyzed some years back in 2013. And this chapter has also shown to be quite important in discussion with the politicians regarding right to education for prisoners from other countries. When it comes to education, it is a legal right for everyone to have access to education when they are incarcerated. However, we can also see that several issues that can interfere and sometimes also challenge the access to education in prisons. The nature purpose of conviction and the sentence is stated to be to prevent crime and an individual and also a general perspective on prevention. But it also is an aim to try to rehabilitate the people to a life after without new crime after release from prison, so prepare for re-entry to the society. However, there are always issues when the sentence itself, it's control issues, it's security issues that can put some limitations to the access to education. But also the kind of principles that is how they are interpreted in the different institutions can also vary more than we actually want them to do. So it could be problems with who get access, how much education they will get access to, and when they will have it. And there can be problems with the individual rights and equal rights in the practical side of doing this. Also, there is an issue of rooms, capacity, teachers, language of the prisoners, how much they get access to education, and how and one of the very clearly limiting forces at the moment is that the limited access to internet that is in the prisons, mainly due to control of security issues. The funding for prison education in Norway is kind of different from some other countries because it is like since the education authorities took over the control with the education also for the prisoners, it has been on the education budget instead of the prison and correction budget. So in 1996, the government for first time had a specific account in the national budget for prison education. The budget is earmarked to cover needs under the Education Act, which I said earlier is mainly related to secondary education and prepare people for training, vocational training. The responsibility for the education for the prisoners has been delegated to the county governor of Vestland County, where Bergen is in the core of the Vestland County and where the county governor also has got his office. So the country administration nationwide are obliged to guarantee access to necessary facilities, and there are earmarked budgets for taking care of education. When it comes to the next question I will raise here, what do we know about incarcerated adults and their need for education? We've been doing these surveys since, as I said, 2004 was the first time we did this surveys. But the first round of assessment of prison education happened 1 year earlier, but it was mainly consisting of smaller projects. In 2004, we did the first nationwide survey of needs and challenges in prison education. We've been repeating this exercise like every second, third years through these last 20 years. Most of them have been done as studies with the whole population of the prisoners in Norway, but some of them in more limited samples. The response rate, and the way the prisoners participate in the studies have been pretty decent. It was better in the early years, 2004, 2006, 2009, more than 60% participated. The last time we did it was during the pandemic, and there were many obstacles to do this in the same way we have done before, and we ended up with a response rate of 38. But there's still decent numbers, but of course it's a little bit more risky whether we have a representative sample of prisoners participating when it's down to 38%. Dissemination we have been accumulated over these years. We have been writing more than 27 national reports in Norwegian. We have published 20 international peer-reviewed research articles on topics from these exercises. There have been several books, book chapters, and we are also very proud that we have now a working CE course that we offers for personnel working in prison education biannually. And we participate at local conferences, network meetings, like my colleagues in the research group will be at the network meeting for teachers and school directors working with prison education next week in Kristiansand here in Norway. If we should summarize this work in a very few keywords, that most of the time we are doing assessment of the teaching programs and see who is participating, what the needs and wishes, and see if there are compliance between needs and wishes among the prisoners. This part of the work has resulted in first in very early in the work, it resulted in that we got offers of education in all prison institutions in Norway. It was lacking in several when we started this work, but it has been established now, access to education in all prisons in Norway. We also found later on that the prisoners were asking for more vocation programs. They were more costly, and therefore in the beginning it was far more of the college preparatory work. So who is the typical person in prison in Norway? It's a young male of Norwegian origin, convicted to a relatively short sentence, half of them less than 3 months, dropped out of school before completing high school, has a weak learning skills, and many shows signs of psychiatric disorders. There are some figures for those interested in what is of the prison system in Norway. Mean age like 35, it was higher in 2021. Without Norwegian prisoners without completed primary education, that has no formal education, have been around 7% for many years, but lately in the last we had a higher educated sample, so it was like 5% did not completed primary education. The blue line here indicates where the national average is, and it's been rising due to the Statistic Norway has started using new criteria to define this. When it comes to formal education, we can see that it's been most of them have elementary school as the maximum or the formal education level. It's been slightly increasing with those who have completed secondary education, but university college education is as it has been over these years. When it comes to general education level in Norway, the prisoners are pretty much as it was in general population in 1970s. So they lag approximately one generation behind. Those who have completed secondary education is on a rise, but still it is like 30% was in 2021, and that's about half the number of those outside of prison, where 60 to 70% have completed a secondary education. The majority of the prisoners express a wish to do something related to what is completed. Those who have lowest rate of wishes, it's those without any formal education. But the other one, they would like to have. We can also see the participation in education is dependent on length of the sentence. So it's steadily increasing from those with a very short sentence up until the longest one. We don't have life sentence as a principle in Norway, but 21 years is like the maximum you could be convicted to. We have seen there is a drop for those with 7 to 8 years length of prison sentence, but we don't understand what's happening there. But it's been repeating over several years. Mostly they are satisfied with their education program. So 80% around that says they are satisfied with their education program when they are participating in the prisons. However, we can see there's also is a group of those who are taking higher education, not satisfied, and that's pretty much understandable because it's quite hard to combine university studies in Norway with being incarcerated. When it comes to learning challenges and disorders, we know pretty much how much, well, I'm already over my time, but I'll do some of these slides also, if you don't mind. We do see there is increase in problems with reading, writing, and also mathematics or spelling skills among the prisoners. We see that the part of prisoners in the younger groups show more of these kinds of problems, or the report more of problem with reading, spelling, and mathematics compared to the eldest group. And probably that's also related to that we have more of those young people with impulse control issues, etc., among the younger ones, and those later on, it's a different kind of crime theory often see they're convicted for. When it comes to dyslexia as a learning disability, there are approximately 1 in 3 report that they have already been assessed and have dyslexia. Half of the participants think they have dyslexia when we are using some other questions to assess this. And when we're doing more of a kind of a screening test, it's also approximately 40 to 50% that cross the threshold for having dyslexia. So probably underreported how many have this kind of learning disability. It is similar when it comes to ADHD. 1 in 3 report that they have already been diagnosed when we do the survey. When we look upon how they are reporting back the symptoms on the World Health Organization's adult screener for ADHD, there is slightly higher figures. If we look at that, how they are solving attention tasks, it's 70 to 80% actually in the younger groups that have problems with the attention control. So it's a huge issue here. When it comes to the reading scores that on this adult reading questionnaire that we have been using, we can see they are related to the motivation for education. And in particular, we can see it's that reading problems are related to what is stated as a motivation. It's a lack of motivation for doing education. But it is like, as we have seen also, some of them are prone to approach school in spite of that they have a lack of motivation for doing an education, but mostly it is what we have been referring to as kind of escape motives. It is what they say that the social and situation reasons are the most important for approaching school. In the other groups, it is like in all other samples of students, we can find that changing coping with the future is a very important motive to approach education and also to acquire more knowledge and skills. But social and situational reasons, my friends are in school, there's less boredom than spending time in a cell, it's better than working. These are the motives they are giving for approaching school. When we are looking into more this topic of motivation for education, we've been using the self-determination theory from for looking also into the prisoners' motivation. And we find that there are like five factors that seems to be catching the variability of motivation for the students in prisons. And in particular for the young ones, we can see that they are more external motivated than compared to the elder students. And they are lower on internal motivation. That seems to be must be slightly developed also to be successful as a student. When it comes to what kind of barriers they report to education, we've been using Cross's description of this from 1981 from the book Adults as Learners, Increasing Participation and Facilitating Learning, which is discussing situation barriers, institution barriers, dispositional barriers, in addition to informal barriers and other preferences. So we created a questionnaire based on these issues. When we do go into the analysis of these barriers to education, we find that there are three components of barriers that are reported back from our participants. So one is the institutional barriers, the practical arrangement insufficient, not enough information, lack of access to internet and software. And the situational barriers, it's not interested, the education will help me, etc. And the dispositional barriers where there are difficulties, more internal aspects of themselves. And we find institutional barriers increased among those older than 25, but for those younger ones, they are reporting more of dispositional barriers to education. The top 5 barriers they are reporting, when we go into the single ones, it's the lack of access to software. Internet is the most important thing. The second one is I would rather work. And then, of course, it is like my sentence will end before I can complete my education, which is understandable since many of them, more approximately half of the prisoners in Norway, they have a very short sentence. The training I'm interested in does not exist. I'm not getting enough information about education. And the last one here came as a quite surprise to the administrators and to the people in the schools. The last thing I would just talk a little bit about is that we have lately also been trying to explore the communication skills among incarcerated adults. This is a topic we knew practically nothing about in Norway, and also international. We have found very little information on communication skills among incarcerated adults. There's a lot of work been done on the young people in custody and in young offenders, but nothing about the adults. So we used the Latrobe communication questionnaire, which had been designed particularly for this, and we used it as a part of this last survey in 2021. What we can see is that we find that 3 components of communication based on the principal component analysis. So it's one part of that communication is impulsivity. The second one was conversational flow, and the last one, conversational effectiveness. Everything is related to communicate. So there's a high degree of correlation between these 3 components. I will just skip these details here. It was just, you can take them. But the important thing is we can find that these conversation skills among the prisoners are very closely related to the highest formal education. If we look upon the data from the original things, that those with a traumatic brain injury with score around 54 on this scale, and we can see those with lack of education down to only completed first year of secondary school, they score higher, so they are less efficient in their communication skills than actually people who have a traumatic brain injury. It was very interesting to see this linear relationship. It's also related to the different kinds also of learning disabilities we have been asking them about. And very similar pictures actually, whether they have a language disorder, they have dyslexia, or they have ADHD, but with some small minor differences in different aspects. So of course, this research has added a very sound basis altogether for policy making and program planning. It's a very close collaboration we have with the county governor's office and also with the administration for the correction in Norway. It's an important knowledge base for teachers, administrators. We have been also handling competence enhancement for teachers, school administrators, and we have also been developing some additional tools for assessment, education, counseling. The funding for prison education during these years, this is one kind of important aspect also. There are some milestones in the Norwegian correction here. In 1986 was the first year this was on the budget in a separate way. The white paper published in 2005, we saw a sharp increase in the funding for prison education at the time. But then we had also some, the Progressive Party in Norway was a part of the government in 2015, and they were eager to be harsh on crime. So they rented a prison in the Netherlands and sent prisoners out of the country, which had never happened before. But you can also see that the funding for prison education in Norway was not influenced by this at all. So independent of the political situation in Norway, prison education seems to be doing well. And it also is when the former conservative government we had, they introduced a kind of effectiveness reform for or bureaucracy in Norway. Then the prisons got a 5% budget cut every year, but for prison education, it was not affected by this. So still we can see there's a large discrepancy in formal education between adults in the penitentiary and the general population, but we do make efforts to try to close this gap. The prevalence of learning deficits and impaired communication skills is high, and because of the communication skills, we think this is in particular influencing also both the court work in the court and in the prisons, and it makes them a very vulnerable group. The import model and separate budget for education for prisoners has sheltered prison education from effectivity requirements imposed on the prison system. We will still have challenges regarding access to computers and internet, in addition to access to higher education. Systematic research had an impact on public opinion in Norway and policy making, as well as development of funding for the prison education. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Abjorsen, for this great synthesis. I'll hand out over now to Annette Storgard and Linda Kver-Minke, Professor of Law at the University of Southern Denmark and at the University of Aarhus, and Ili Siematursavik, University of Greenland. So hand in to you, Annette, go ahead.
Thank you very much. We are just discussing different how to make the picture that will show you a little bit more. Yeah, men de kan også se det der. Yeah. Thank you very much. I hope that it will be possible to hear me. If not, please stop me. I shall talk slowly and try to make myself clear. Excuse me if my English is not the very best. Linda and I, we have decided to talk together, but we have split up our parts, and the agreement is that I will take you into an introduction to the legal basis of offering education in prisons, and I will start out with an international perspective, and then turn to the European perspective, and finally turn to the Danish legal basis for offering education in prisons. Do that very briefly and focus only on regulation that refers directly to education. afterwards, we would very much like to discuss probably the interconnection between what we read in the law and in the legal regulation and what we see in practice. We think Denmark is a good example of that. And also, we like very much to discuss the principle of normality or normalization, I would say, in the prison system. We see that education is a starting point for this discussion. Please remember that you always have to understand of nations in a kind of context. Many people expect Nordic countries and maybe and at least Denmark to be very kind place and very humane place and a very positive place. And compared to many parts of the world, it is so. So even if we will present something in a more critical perspective, this is still to be understood in a broader context, and with that, that we want to talk down Denmark very much, but want to pinpoint situations or things that is even in our life.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Annette, we have difficulties in hearing you. Just maybe be
Again?
more clear, more focus on the computer. It would help. Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. This way.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I know. I'm sorry. So starting out with the Mandela rules, the international rules on prisoners, which I hope many people can connect to because it's an international rule. I just point at a few places where education is specifically mentioned and pointed at. For instance, rule number 91, where it says that while having people in prison or in a similar measure, it has a purpose, and the purpose is to establish in the people the will to lead a law-abiding and self-supporting lives. And that, of course, in our eyes, very much includes increasing the standard or the level of people's education. And again, that the treatment as such should aim at encouraging people's self-respect and develop their sense of responsibility. That is all about giving more self-esteem to people and how to find that for a large degree through education. The next rule says it even more clear, namely in order to reach the goals mentioned in Rule 91, different means should be used, and one of them is education. And the education is not just thought as being one size fits all. The education offered should meet the needs of each individual person in the prison. So already at this international level, we see very clear indications that education worldwide would be very preferable in prisons. So let us move along to the European level. And we have in Europe a set of prison rules that we use to talk about as the European prison rules. The European prison rules is decided in the Council of Europe. And please do not mix up the Council of Europe with the EU. The EU has 28 member countries, whereas the Council of Europe has 48 member countries. So the Council of Europe is not to the same degree as the EU, only rich Western European countries. The Council of Europe also refers to Southern and to Eastern European countries. And the prison rules is confirmed in the Council of Europe, and in the bottom of the site on the left page, I gave you the link directly to the newly revised European prison rules. It says in rule number 28 that every prison shall seek to provide all prisoners with access to educational programs. Please be aware of that sentence when Linda will speak a little bit later. And also it says that particular attention should be paid to young people and to people with specific needs in regard to education. And a very interesting rule is that people should receive advice while in prison, that they can so that they can seek the education that they themselves the 2.4 shall have no less status than work within this regime. And that is actually one thing that Denmark respects, saying that whether you work, whether you educate yourself, go to school or study, or whether you are in any other programs, such like programs, you will have the same daily payment for your occupation. The last point to be mentioned from the European level is that it says in 27 that as far as practical, the education of should be integrated in the educational and vocational training system in the country. And it also says that education take place under the auspices of external educational institutions. This is a very clear signal that of the principle of normalization of prison life, saying that prison life should be as much as possible like comparable with the life outside the prison. So quickly to the Danish prison legal system and the legal basis for education in our system. It is actually possible, in accordance with the legal regulation, to apply and to obtain a postponement of the starting of your prison time if you are just about to finalize an education outside the prison. It is also possible in the regulation to ask for transference between different prison institutions in case your personal need is education which is offered in another prison than the one where you are. So they're good. Har jeg ikke 20 minutter? Jamen, du. Sorry. Sorry. So yeah, and during the prison, while you are in prison, there are also very nice rules in the Danish system about how to obtain education. A prisoner has the right and the duty, both and, to be occupied with work, education, or another approved activity. Here you see what I mentioned before, that we equalize between work, education, and approved activity. The approved activity may be drug or alcohol treatment, a cognitive program, or something like that. But the next rule says in the Danish regulation that if a prisoner is going to be expelled upon the imprisonment, this prisoner cannot receive education and cannot participate in approved activities. This is something that the international or the European regulation not even had the fantasy to mention, but the Danish politicians had this good idea to exclude people who are not going to stay in Denmark from the more future-oriented parts of the time in prison. And it says in the Danish regulation that the wish of the prisoner must be met to the largest degree possible regarding choice of work or education inside or outside the prison. A very lovely rule, and Linda will illustrate how it is practiced a little bit. Prisoners shall also receive guidance concerning redressing their personal educational deficits, meaning that an individual plan for education should be made. For you to be able to look up the Danish code on execution of penalties, I gave you the full name of it in the bottom of this page. Please look it up and ask later on if you want a translation of some of it. So before I leave the word to Linda, I will introduce a few key figures on Danish prisons. The Danish prison rate is 72 in the newest source that I could find, meaning that 72 out of 100,000 inhabitants are imprisoned. That is a rate which has gradually increased from about 60 over the latest 10 years or something like that. We have a number of prison places of a little bit more than 4,000, and 39% of all our prisoners are not yet sentenced. They are in pre-trial detainee, where I can promise you that education does not play a very big role. The latest number on occupancy level is 102, but that is of course an average over 1 year, and it shifts all the time. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. So with these words, I let the words over to Linda.
Yes. Thank you. Most prisoners have possibility to follow education on different levels if they wish to. In general, prisoners suffering from dyslexia are offered supportive teaching in the prison class, both at primary and secondary school level. Elementary vocational education counts teaching in Danish, maths, and English. Higher education is based on single subject teaching. In most cases, prisoners are self-students with the supervision by a teacher from a high school in the local area of the prison. Then in Danish prison, there is a huge range of labor market courses. And the labor market courses is can be a very short course. They were introduced in 2013, and they provide skills for mainly unskilled work. As I mentioned, the courses are short term, running from 1 day to up to 7 to 9 weeks. And the participants, they receive a diploma which both provide competence to work within a specific area and or gives merit for further courses. The kind of courses depend on the facilities in the prison. For example, will prisons with a welding workshop offer welding courses? Prisons with farm offer courses in care and keeping of livestock. Several prisons offer cleaning courses simply because cleaning is a part of daily life in prison. The courses are divided into different topics, interdisciplinary courses. It can be first aid and conflict management, IT and communication, which is about the Office program, the Word, the PowerPoint program, and also to have competences in finding out digital solutions for job seeking, courses in cleaning and service, hotel, restaurant, agriculture, textile and leather industry, and other services can be flower arrangement. And these labor market courses were introduced in 2013. And as you can see, the development from 13 to 14 and 15, the numbers of courses rise dramatically, and the dropout is very low. So in that way, it's very popular. Yeah, most prisoners follow education in an ordinary prison wing, but a small group is selected to reside in an education wing. Education wings in Danish prisons were introduced in 2013-14. Every 4th year, the Danish prison system have an agreement with the government where the economy for the Danish prison system is decided. And in 2013, 2 new education wings were opened. One at the closed prison Nyborg, and this wing has 18 cells, and one at Søby Søgaard open prison, a wing with 27 cells. In addition, and it's very interesting, but without a formal agreement, another section at Søby Søgaard, it was a closed prison wing, they simply decided that one separate wing with 14 cells should be an education wing. And I will come back to that more on official education wing. In the latest multi-year agreement running from 2022 to 25, one more prison wing has opened in an open prison, and this wing has 10 cells. And in addition, one or two other education wings will open, and they will have 10 to 20 cells. So currently, we have 3, or if you add the one informal education wing, but 3 wings with 55 cells. And it's not that much, but on the other hand, it's also positive that this education wing is a new thing in Danish prisons. The target group for education wings is mainly for prisoners below the age of 30. They has to be motivated, and in addition, they must not suffer from serious social or serious health problems. And finally, order and security they have to be approved according to order and security to be placed on this education wing. On this education wing, prisoners are provided computers, and they can send and receive teaching material and assignments. They have access, but it's very limited to the internet. And there is a continuous control of computer use in this education wing. Okay, now we will change perspective to another education offer, which is quite innovative because it involves teaching prisoners at a high academic level together with students from the outside. This is only possible due to a prison university partnership between a University of Southern Denmark and a local prison nearby, the Søbysøgaard prison. And here you see some pictures. It's my university, the big gray building in the bottom of this slide. And we have a total of 30,000 students and enrolls about 150 law students every year. Søbysøgaard, this is a farm prison, but they also have this newly built closed prison section with the capacity of 42 prisoners. And in this closed prison section is the place where the teaching takes place. And the agreement on our prison university partnership includes that our law school, my law school, offers a 5 ECTS elective course at bachelor level with 24 seats, of which half of the seats are reserved for incarcerated people, and the other half are reserved for law students from my university. The course responsible from the university has motivational clarifying conversations with all applicants from both the university and the prison. And based on the conversations and matching, the university is responsible for the enrollment of all 24 students at the course. And finally, the university takes care of the teaching and examination in the elective 5 ECTS course, Crime, Punishment and Crime Preventive Strategies. The prison, Søbysøgaard, is responsible for the security approval of the applicants among the incarcerated people, and the incarcerated people are serving sentences running from 6 months up to lifetime. The prison also provides staff resources for the security check-in and the classroom, which is resided in a closed prison wing. Finally, Søbysøgaard Prison is paying the course fee for the open university seats for the incarcerated people. The price is about 322 euro per participant. And the main reason for this prison university partnership is the possibility to teach and learn together across difference, which is supposed to be beneficial for both law students from the inside and both students from the inside and the law students from the outside. And the learning goals, they are very much inspired by the US program Inside Out Prison Exchange Program. And you can read much more about the Inside Out Prison Exchange Program. It's amazing, and it has been running since 1997. So it's a very well tried program. But one of the learning goals are by means of transformational education and learning through dialogue across differences. The learning and teaching model is supposed to challenge prejudices and support critical thinking. This can support social change and make our society more inclusive. Another goal is that students will gain more knowledge of criminal justice matters through combining theoretical and practical knowledge within the course topic. And it's about crime and punishment. A third goal is that the learning model will provide better law students and lawyers, and to inspire incarcerated people to seek more education. The course runs during a whole semester where we meet, teach, and learn through 3.5 hours every week in at least 10 weeks. Hereafter, the students have to pass the exam. And the exam is twofold. Within the course syllabus, the students select a topic for their written synopsis, which they make in groups out of choice mixed by students from the inside and outside. They have 4 days to write their paper, and they write the paper inside the prison. The assignment weighs 50% of the overall character. Hereafter, the students are having a 20-minute individual oral examination in their paper and in course syllabus in general. The oral examination also takes place in the prison, and the oral presentation weighs half of the overall character. And I have to show you a selection of paper titles by the groups of students. And I think they are quite amazing. They have written papers about disciplinary punishment in prison, explanation on recidivism, gang-related crime causes and crime preventive strategies, prisoners' way of communication, mobile phones behind bars, purpose of punishment, extra legal factors on punishment, and how to create safe societies and reduce crime through supporting deprived housing areas. All papers include theoretical and practical knowledge about the topic. It's really exciting. Regarding the numbers of students enrolled and background information of them, as showed in the table, 231 people have applied for the course, of which 170 were enrolled and 61 rejected. Dropouts count 20 people, of which 17 were incarcerated people. 10 of them dropped out because of the COVID, 5 because of an unexpected early release. It was, of course, positive for them, but not. I was not that happy, but I didn't say. 2 because of personal problems. The 3 dropouts among outside students were due to health problems. In total, 150 students, 69 incarcerated individuals, and 81 law students have finished the course. All participants from the inside were male, and most of the law students were female. But most of our law students in general are female, so it's not odd. And one can ask, why do they do it? Why do they apply for such a course? Because the outside students, the law students, they are taught behind bars. They are not allowed to have their laptop. They're not allowed to have their cell phone. And the local prison is far from university, so we have to travel a lot. So why do they do it? And the outside the law students apply because they have a strong professional interest in criminal law and ambitions to pursue a career within the legal system. They also wish more involvement of practical knowledge to gain insight and knowledge from people who have experienced the penal system firsthand. In the same way, inside the students, the incarcerated people also applies because of a desire to gain more knowledge about the law, about the legal system. They also apply because of curiosity and that the course has got good reviews from fellow prisoners. finally, they, and I think it's very interesting, they apply to combat isolation during incarceration, as they express it, to meet and learn together with normal students from the outside. Evaluation results about learning outcomes shows that the students gain more knowledge. As a student from the outside puts it, we are experts in each of our area. Inside students suggest points which you haven't considered. Many law students miss the connection between theoretical and practical knowledge. This is possible because of the good open dialogue between inside and outside students. In other words, the outside students gain more knowledge on the complexity of crime and law cases through dialogue and learning together with inside students. This will hopefully make them better students and lawyers in the future. Many incarcerated people have limited knowledge about why society punish. As an inside student puts it, it's a good way to understand why society punish, and also knowledge about principles in the procedure code and rules in the penal sentence enforcement law. Many inside students claim that they really appreciate to learn together with students from the outside, or as an inside student puts it, to be introduced to normal topics of conversation and to debate, discuss on a more normal level. This course is adding a much missed normality. Yeah. Another a very important learning outcome is that this course also supports transformative education and learning, to break down prejudices, to change some preconceived notions I had as an outside student claims. And an inside student expressed it as, I have experienced how people from the university are, and we are not that different at all. And this picture is an inside student who receives his diploma, and he's so proud because he fulfilled a course on a high academic level. And one could ask, okay, what afterwards? Will they continue education? And I know that among the 69 inside students who have fulfilled, at least 6 of them have continued their study at university level, studying law, psychology, and engineering. And they express, if they hadn't met normal students from the outside, they would never dare to seek out a university. They couldn't imagine that they were able to to be a part of a higher academic education system. So that's it. It was a speed talk, but hopefully the time was fine.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Annette, and thank you, Arv, for these presentations. I think the presentations today have raised some questions, so I'll share it with you. We have a couple of questions coming from the audience. Maybe I'll start with a question for Arve. You mentioned that prisoners' satisfaction with higher education was lower. Is it possible to give us more information about on the difficulties of this level of education offered in prison in Norway?
I just see the screen from Linda still here, so it's still shared, so I don't know if you can see me. The higher education, and it has been an issue in Norway for some years now, after we adopted the European Agreement on Higher Education, and one of the kind of interpretation of these regulations in Norway was a closer follow-up of the students enrolled at the university. It's required more on-campus participation for students, which made it harder for prisoners to actually follow courses at the university level. And during the pandemic, it was we changed a lot of the teaching over to internet, to web, and video conferencing opportunities. But following the pandemic, it is like the attitude or the top level of the universities have changed again back to on-campus requirements. And it's kind of surprising also to see that at the university here in Bergen, they actually de-install the cameras in the lecture halls, so we can't even use like video notes and things like that as a part of the teaching anymore. So we have to do separate teaching then from office computers instead of having these parts of the university activities available for also people incarcerated. Those who are participating in university programs, so they were less satisfied, and it's because there's so many limitations actually imposed on participation. Also because of the lack of access to internet, and there's been a work group in Norway for many years trying to solve some of the issues around secure internet for prisoners, but they've not been able to so far come up with a good solution without any of the kind of security holes. Maybe also it has been more complicated again during the last years because we have had some of these kind of dark room cases going on in Norway, those who are approaching the dark web. And of course, those convicted for these kind of crimes, they also have more than average competence in using the internet for other reasons. And therefore, people seem to also think there are even higher challenges now.
Thank you. I have also a question for maybe Linda. The prison you referred to in the presentation, what are the length of the sentences, minimum or maximum sentences? You mentioned
It's
go ahead.
From 6 months in the open part of the prison, mainly up to lifetime. In Denmark, we have lifetime, opposite to Norway. It's long sentences. Many participants have been gang related, and they serve very long sentences in general, because in Denmark they are punished double punishment because of their gang affiliation. It's in the law text, so it's long sentences. Also, it's a closed. It's a how do you say, a high security, high security prison wing. It's mainly people with very long sentences who serves there.
And people would like to know also in Norway, is it the same range of sentences?
The maximum you can be convicted for in Norway nowadays are 21 years. But then they have introduced some years back also something they call secure remand, which is an opportunity to prolong the sentence until they show some kind of whatever remorse, better behavior, etc. You can apply for what you call it, a release from the prison again. The normal is that people serve 2/3 of their sentence behind bars, and the rest is like on parole. But with the secure remand, they have to apply to be released. But for most of the regular prisoners, it is like kind of not directly automatic, but it is like it's normally be released on parole after 2/3 of the sentence.
I have
in
also
practice, these people could now be incarcerated for lifetime. Those with the longest sentence and secure remand.
there's a lot of question concerning the open prison concept that coming out from Norway and Denmark. We know that in Denmark it's the 1/3 of the prison that are open space prison. Do you in your practices or in your research do you observe some differences between the context for education in prison? Does it change anything? Does the relation to teachers change a little bit in these kinds of environment between open and closed or security prison? It's a question for all of you.
In an open prison, it's possible to follow education on the outside of in the surrounding society, so they can have furlough to go to an education institution in the surrounding society. So it's of course a huge difference, because if they have this possibility, then they can relate to a normal educational system in the surrounding society. But I have to say that the number of permissions have dropped dramatically within the last 5 years, because we have had a stricter policy on the penal sentence enforcement law.
There was a change in the government policies, or
In the policy, and that leads to the practice. The thing is that being granted a prison is something that
I don't understand. We don't understand you quite a bit. You have to focus more on the. Okay, great.
being granted a prison leave is something that you have to apply for. It's a kind of a privilege, and the conditions to be granted a prison leave has been much stricter than before, and more in practice than in the legal regulation. You know, there is a lot of internal regulation between the law and the practice, which the prison staff and the prison administration has to follow. And these rules have been much restricted. And in contrary to the Norwegian example, this influences on the rate of people who obtain an early release, a release on parole after 2/3, because the mechanism is that it's very often a precondition for being released on parole that you have been granted a prison leave for a period. So now we have a rejection rate of early release, or release after 2/3 of the sentence. We have a rejection rate of almost 40%. So almost 40% of all Danish prisoners are not allowed a release on parole.
That maybe could explain some of the transfer we've been observing in Kosovo, to respect the non-overpopulation of prison. So you thought about 100% or 102% of populating in prison. So they're trying to manage this number.
Yes, by sending expelled prisoners out of the country, and in addition, they are building new prisons to house all the people. And this overcrowding problem is, of course, because of longer sentences for the last 10 years or something like that. And then in addition, that the prisoners cannot get their parole, so they stay for a longer time. Yeah.
We know that you've. I think it's Annette that made it clear on the guidance principle that is regulating prison systems and prison education. You talked about the question of the individualization of penal, the normalization of the lifestyle in there, and the autonomy and the responsibility principle.
Yeah.
I think that the normality is pretty important in the Scandinavian way to manage the prison. Does it help a little bit all the programs related to education, whether in open space prison or in maximum or more security prison in Denmark, Greenland, or Norway? Do you see a sort of tendency to be more respectful of this aspect of normalization?
In some ways, the era of normalization is over in Denmark. It was a very high valued idea 15 years ago, 15 years plus ago, and then slowly new values took over, and the idea of normalization, which was in the program of principles for the prison service, is not very well known today among prison staff people, and the idea of, for instance, cooperating with external teachers, doctors, etc., having them come into the prison and also work outside the prison is not practiced in Denmark, and at least not to the extent that we believe it is in Norway.
Maybe Harvey, you can follow on this.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised about the development that they are sketching out for Denmark now, because we used to have a very close collaboration among the Nordic countries when it came to research and also policy making around correction. But it is like the old generation of administrators, when they went out of office, it doesn't seem to be substituted by new networks things. But for open facilities in Norway, this kind of common that for the end of a sentence, that the prisoners are still moved into an open facility, and it's a part of the normalization process. Although some of these facilities we have been insulated on islands, but it is like they are communicate with the mainland. So one of the more famous one we have now is Bastø outside of Oslo, that used to be a kind of a home for not so well-behaved boys in the old days, and then the prison system took over, and we had a similar facility here just north of Bergen, but that was closed down some years back, and they establish new facilities. But at the moment, the open facility here in Bergen are mostly for female prisoners, and we don't know what will happen when they know it's starting to open new female prisons in other parts of the country, and I would like to put them together there. But at the moment, when you are in an open facility, you have access to the schools outside of prison. But there is like a two-level or two steps kind of offer there, that we also have some transfer schools, which is a school department within one of the regular secondary schools, where prisoners on the transfer to the community back to the community could be spending like 1 semester, 2 semesters in one of these transfer facilities before they complete their education in a regular secondary school. And there's a very close collaboration. It's the same school that serves also those who are in prison, who also offer these transfer classes. So I think we're still doing a pretty decent job on the normalization of what's going on, and also since we have the local schools responsible also for prisoners, it would be like the papers they get for the education, the diplomas is from a local school, a regular school, and not from a prison facility, which I think also could be important. But I also had a question for you, Linda, and that was, I wrote it in the chat here. I didn't have access to the Q&As, but it is like this, AMU, the work market courses that is offered, are they giving some kind of formal qualifications?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it is like
the labor market courses. Yes, they receive a diploma, and when they have finished the course, they are released, then they can have a job in the sector that is involved in the course. For example, cleaning service, restaurant, hotel. We also have cooking classes. An aspect of normalization is that the prisoners cook for themselves during incarceration. They shop groceries and they cook for themselves. And it's so smart to have these cooking classes, because they can use their competences when they are released, but also while behind bars, because they have to cook for themselves. So they learn about nutrition and how to cook good food in a cheap and healthy manner. So this is very good. And then we have these welding and scaffold building courses, and when they are released, they can seek a job within that sector.
These things seems to be very parallel to what we are doing here in Norway also, so they can get some kind of skill certificate, competence certificate based on these things, even though they are not fully trained like a skilled worker or something. But it could be a one step in the direction.
So thank you all for your insight. Okay,
sorry.
maybe just a little one. We have to close the webinar today. So go ahead, Annette.
I just wanted to add that the same goes for ordinary school, for basic school programs, 10th class or 9th class. That is the same. You have an exam like outside, and you have a diploma.
Okay, thank you. So I'll hand down over to the chair, Julie Autain, to close this webinar. Thank you.
We want to warmly thank our panelists. Your presentation gave us a relevant insight into the realities of your respective countries. Thank you all for your attendance, and we invite you to visit our website and sign in for our newsletter so you don't miss our next webinar that will be this fall. We wish you all a good day, and today's presentation will be available also on YouTube in about 2 weeks. So thank you very much for your participation. Have a good day.